A very good afternoon to all the students of class 12. Today I'm going to take on the lesson On the Face of It, written by Susan Hill. Well, to begin with, as the title suggests, On the Face of It, this means we can say the outwardly appearance can be very different from a person's inside. Inside means how the person is from within. For example, a very beautiful person can be very ugly internally. Ugly in the sense can have a stone heart, can have no feelings, no compassion, no sympathy. So to what avail is that beauty? Similarly, you must have all heard the saying, all that glitters is not gold. And also, looks can be deceptive. Or another one is, don't judge a book by its cover. Because what's given on the cover, maybe the content inside is completely different. And maybe if the cover is very interesting, the content may not be so interesting. So similarly, whenever we come across people in life, sometimes we form an opinion about those people just on their face value. And we may form a negative opinion of people, or we may form a positive opinion. If we form a positive, that's okay. But if we form a negative opinion about people, and then gradually when we start, associating with that person more often, then we realize that the person is very, very different to deal with. And then we tend to change our opinion. So similarly, here on the face of it, as we come across the characters in the story, Mr. Lamb is very, very friendly, very welcoming. He's an inspirational figure, and how he inspires and fulfills his purpose in life by inspiring Derrick. So outwardly, he appears to be very happy, but internally, when we read the chapter and we analyze the character sketch of Mr. Lamb, then we realize that basically he's very lonely. And he yearns for company, longs for company. So, Derrick also on the other side seems to be very hostile outwardly and very pent up, and he doesn't like to associate with people because all that he has heard has hurt him a lot. But somewhere he does have a little softness in him, and that is why he is able to change himself, and Mr. Lamb is able to transform him. So on the face of it, basically this lesson, it deals with the loss of a kind of a loss and a sense of isolation. And it is a motivating factor to teach that individual how to adapt and how to live with it and how to face it bravely. Because in every situation that we face in life, we must remember that we have to brave it. We can't give up. We should learn to live with it, and we should try to overcome any kind of complex if we have developed within ourselves. So we should get over it. So that is what this chapter actually deals with. So we must accept whatever comes our way. We should take it in our stride, and we should brave it all with an aplomb. I'm giving you a new word here. Maybe some of you must be knowing it. A-P-L-O-M-B, aplomb. Now the B is silent when we pronounce it, so it's aplomb. This means face it calmly with a lot of self-confidence, okay? Just as Mr. Lamb does. And if we keep grumbling over any kind of situation that we are facing or any kind of handicap that we are experiencing, that will not solve the problem. In fact, grumbling will make it even worse. So if we accept it, and if we try to get over it, and if we try to conquer it, overcome it, then things will become more smooth, and we will be able to actually move on in life happily. So we come across the character Derrick, who's a young lad of 14 years, and he is basically sinking in an abyss Abyss. Now, abyss is a kind of a gorge, or you can, in simple words, you can say a deep hole, okay? So he is sinking into the abyss of despair. Despair is loss of hope, and with that comes frustration. And he would have actually doomed himself for a lifetime in mental isolation, or, you know, mental desolation, if he had not met Mr. Lamb, who actually, you know, tried to bring out the goodness in him and tried to make him happier by telling him how to deal with things in life, okay? To have a positive outlook and attitude towards any kind of situation in life. And he shares his own experiences, and slowly he empowers him to, you know, get over it and move on. So basically that's what the whole story is about. And Derrick, who moves into the garden very stealthily, quietly, he thinks there's nobody around, but he's startled when he hears Mr. Lamb saying that mind the apples. He doesn't want Derrick to stamp over them or to fall, you know. So he's taken by surprise, and immediately he wants to go away from there. But Mr. Lamb has a knack of, you know, holding on to him and trying to build up a conversation. And slowly he realizes what Derrick is actually going through. And he realizes that he is a complex-ridden boy, okay? And he tries to tell him that don't be afraid. And in fact, then Derrick points out that he's not afraid. It's people who are afraid of him because of his burnt face. So again and again, he wants to bring across the point about his burnt face, his acid-burnt face. But Mr. Lamb does not react. You know, he does not show any kind of reaction to his burnt face and what he's talking about. And he tries to build up his confidence by telling him that he loves all creatures of God. And why? Because God never created anything worthless, and there's nothing worthless in this world and to be considered as trash. And then he goes on to justify this statement by comparing the weeds to the flowers. Now he tells them that the weeds are also living, the flowers are also living. So why do we, I mean, you know, they both have life in them. One are termed as weeds and they're considered to be unwanted, while the others are flowers. But they both have a right to live, okay? Then he goes on to tell him that he too is handicapped as he has a tin leg. And children do make fun of him and they call him Lamy Lamb, and you know, so he's taken it in his stride and he doesn't feel upset about it. And Derrick, however, tries to tell him that his leg is covered by the, you know, his trousers, so it's not so much there for everyone to see as much as his face. Then Mr. Lamb tries to deal with all the negativity that is there in Derrick in a positive way, and he advises him to think of the beautiful objects of the world. Why only keep thinking about the burnt face? Think about the other beautiful aspects that there are in life. Now this is the conversation that Mr. Lamb builds up with Derrick is a very unusual one for him. It's quite peculiar because Derrick had never heard any such things before, or this kind of conversation before. So he is quite interested slowly in what Mr. Lamb is trying to tell him. And during the conversation, how we can say he's interested is because Derrick makes a very meaningful comment by saying, think of all those people who are worse off than you, you know. So that realization that, you know, we think that our problem is, you know, huge. And but when we go around and we see people facing problems, we realize that our problem is very, very, you know, small, tiny, puny in comparison to the problems faced by other people. But then Derrick once again is very bitter about the comments that he hears from people, you know, like about those two ladies at the bus stop, how they had said that only a mother can love him, and things like that. So Mr. Lamb indirectly, tells him, he advises him that do you take in everything that you hear? So indirectly he's trying to teach him or tell him that you should hear only those things, listen to only those things that are worth listening to or that are worth hearing. Then another example that Mr. Lamb gives about the different way people perceive things is the beehive. For some, it may be just buzzing, it may be a sound, it may be noise, but for Mr. Lamb, it is, humming. Now, humming can be melodious, and humming is soothing to the ears, it's gentle, So he tries to tell him that it's how you perceive things and how you take things. So that is what he tries to tell him, that it is the attitude in life that matters. And then Derrick becomes more interested in what Mr. Lamb is trying to narrate, and he goes on further to tell him about a timid man, a man who's scared of facing death, and all the time he keeps himself shut up in his room, locked up in his room, and so that he doesn't come across any kind of fatal accident. So but then he goes on to tell him that the man died sitting in that bed only because a picture from that was hanging on the wall fell onto his head, and he passed away and killed him. So what Mr. Lamb is trying to tell him is that whatever is destined does happen. So Mr. Lamb does believe that one cannot change one's destiny, but you can improve ways of living. Now, if it was in his destiny for his face to get burnt by that acid, it was there, but that does not mean that life has come to a standstill after that, because he tries to tell him that why do you consider only that part of your body? Look at your hands, look at your legs, look at your feet, look at your brain, your mind. There are other beautiful aspects which can make you move on. So why only concentrate on that part of the body? And then he goes on to tell him that Mr. Lamb tells him that he hates curtains, because curtains shut out things, they block the view. I mean, you cannot see what's outside, and people outside cannot see what's happening inside. So he says that he likes to leave his curtains open so that there is a clear view, there is a free view. He doesn't like to shut his gates, which shows that he wants to welcome everybody into his area, and which symbolizes an open heart, that he's ready to receive, ready to take in everything, and he believes that life cannot be spent in isolation that way. So he's actually trying to motivate and inspire Derrick. And he has encouraging things to tell him for every passive thing that Derrick tells him, because he has observed that Derrick is basically smitten by pessimism. Okay? Then his words of wisdom continue to flow, and he tells Derrick that every human being is his friend. And when Derrick says that, when he also asked him about some of the names of the friends or some of the people who drop in at his place, then he tells him that names do not matter. It can be any Tom, Dick and Harry or whatever it is, but name, you don't have to be acquainted with anybody to call him your friend. And he considers Derrick also to be his friend, even though he doesn't know him so well. And that's the first time that he has entered his garden. So he advises Derrick to love mankind, all mankind, because he gives a very important, lesson to him by saying that hatred corrodes us and it hurts more than the acid. Just as when acid is dropped onto a surface, it corrodes that surface. So hatred also corrodes us from within. It makes us ugly, okay? And it hurts more than the acid that has fallen onto his face. So slowly he's trying to positively inspire him. And he tells him that whatever is his belongs to Derrick, and because he's trying to actually bring out Derrick from that shell in which he has put himself into, because he's over obsessed with himself. Derrick is over obsessed with himself, and he wants to bring him out so that he can see beyond things beyond himself. And that is how when we notice that Derrick says, when he says, I'm going to go back to my mother and I'll come back. And in between, he also tells Mr. Lamb that if you fall from the ladder, you can break your neck and you can die. So if you were on your own. So here we says that we see that what he says is actually that he's thinking about Mr. Lamb also now, and he has tried to open up a little bit. He's tried to change a little bit, okay? And he realizes that his presence in Mr. Lamb's garden can be a source of great help for Mr. Lamb, okay? And then Mr. Lamb says something very philosophical, that people worry, okay? So Mr. Lamb is a very good judge of character, and he knows from the conversation that he's having with Derrick that it has started having a positive effect on Derrick, okay? So in the end, towards the end of the lesson, we see that he springs a surprise by challenging Derrick, that when he says that I'm going home, that he'll never come back. Now the challenge that he throws to Derrick is to help Derrick overcome all the hurdles, hesitations, handicaps and complexes that stop him. So, he throws the challenge across so that maybe because of that challenge, Derrick will actually think beyond himself and will have a broader horizon, and his mindset will change. So Derrick's mindset has begun to change, because when he runs home and he tells his mother about his decision to go back to his new mentor, and in spite of the mother's protest, he runs back to Mr. Lamb's garden. But the irony over here is that what Derrick had apprehended, has actually proved prophetic. Prophetic means like he had said something that he can fall from the ladder and die. So it had seemed like, he's predicted it, kind of a thing, proved prophetic. And Mr. Lamb had actually fallen from the ladder and he had passed away. So it actually comes true. But in the death of Mr. Lamb, there is a big reward, and the reward is that he had passed on, or he had passed on his good vibes, his positivity, his values to Derrick, who belonged to the next generation. So Mr. Lamb had actually trained and he had tutored and he had transformed Derrick, who belonged to the next generation, to carry on his good work before Mr. Lamb passes off into the next world. So Mr. Lamb had actually fulfilled his purpose in life. If we are able to change even one person and form a chain to that, that shows that we have achieved something in life. Because when we all know that, we are all mortal and we have to die and we'll pass on into the next world and everything will be left behind. So if we are able to convey that this love has to continue and we have to help each other, we are all one and mankind is one, we're all equal in the eyes of God, and if we turn to loving everybody instead of building up these walls of hatred and these man-made petty divisions and prejudices, then life would actually become very smooth, and we will be fulfilling God's purpose to bring us onto this earth. Okay, so that's what the chapter is all about. Now if we come on to the characters, the first one is Mr. Lamb. Now after going through the entire chapter, we see what his purpose in life was and how he proved to be such a good mentor to Derrick. So we can say he wanted the welfare of mankind. So we can say he is a philanthropist. and the spelling is Philantropist, philanthropist. To the very core, he's a philanthropist, and he is a compulsive do-gooder. He wants to do good in life. And he is always prepared to overlook all shortcomings and complexes and the mischief of others, and he wants to be nice and good to everyone. And when he sees Derry walking in, rather not walking in, he had climbed over the wall, and he had come in stealthily like that. So he still welcomes him, and he, tells him to walk carefully so that he doesn't trip over the crab apples and hurt himself. So basically, even though he had climbed the wall, he could have shouted at him and said, "What are you doing?" or "You're trespassing in my area," or "Have you come to steal?" But he never did anything of that kind. He just thought for the welfare of Derrick and said, "Don't hurt yourself." And in spite of his leg being blown off during the war, the children, had nicknamed him Lamey Lamb, but he, because of his positive attitude towards life, he doesn't feel bad about it, and he accepts it without grumbling. And he ignores the teasing that's done by the children and the comments that are passed by them. Then the other aspect we can say about his character is he's gregarious by nature and a downright extrovert who believes in universal brotherhood. He believes that all mankind is equal and we should be loving one another, we should be loving each other. And he keeps the gates and windows of his house always open, and he welcomes everybody. He loves all creatures of God, and he asserts that God doesn't make any kind of trash, and everything that God has made interests him. Then he believes in the oneness of all creations of God, oneness. He remarks about the weeds and the flowers, and that the weeds also are worth paying attention to because he grows those weeds, okay? And because it has life in it. Just as we all have life in ourselves. And he believes that one should turn a deaf ear to all that is not acceptable or is not right, or something that pulls us down or makes us weak or makes us complex. We should not be listening to anything like that. And we should actually be sieving all the comments and just take in what is required, what one wants to hear or what is good for us. And filter all that is unwanted. Then Mr. Lamb is a strong advocate of the inevitability of the role played by destiny in life. He believes that destiny is inevitable, and what has to happen will happen. Then a beautiful quality or an extraordinary or a rare quality that Mr. Lamb had was the power of convincing others with his sound arguments. He gave very convincing arguments. And Derrick, who seemed to be incorrigible, almost incorrigible, also turned around and turned over a new leaf, okay, after listening to Mr. Lamb. So, and how do we know that? That he's actually transformed, because in the strong opposition from his mother, this 14-year-old boy, he rushes back to Mr. Lamb's garden, and which shows that he is now bold and courageous. So Mr. Lamb, despite his handicap, he has all the qualities of head and heart that every wise man should emulate, should pick up, should copy, should follow, okay? So that was the character of Mr. Lamb. Then we come on to the character of Derrick. Now, Derrick is a complex-ridden boy of 14, and he's a victim of inferiority complex owing to the accidental spilling of acid on one side of his face. And he always remains conscious of this handicap, and he's full of bitterness. And if he had not met Mr. Lamb, he would have become a total psychological wreck, because he would have lived with that bitterness, and he would have been so miserable that a stage would come when he would become a psychological wreck. So, in the beginning, Derrick, when he comes to the garden, he gives the impression of being a spoilt brat, as he tries to intimidate or frighten Mr. Lamb, whose garden he has trespassed. But slowly and gradually, Derrick's personality unfolds, and we learn that the most torturous psychological block for Derrick results from the excessive importance he gives to the comments of others. Because all the time he's listening to what people are saying, and that makes him even more miserable. And that was the biggest block in his life. And he bears a grudge against the members of the family also, who instead of encouraging him, always keep on pitying him. And there is one thing that a handicapped person does not like to be pitied, okay? Does not like sympathy. Empathy is something else, compassion is something else. But if you're always trying to pity that handicapped person, that pity reminds him again and again that he or she is a miserable creature, and that, people have to shower pity on them and help them. But that is why today we see that handicapped children are also admitted to schools, normal schools, so that they have a normal education along with the others, and there is provision kept for these children so that they can also be brought up among the mainstream. That is why, if they are brought up like that, then they do not develop any kind of complex, and they feel that we are no less than the others. So that is why today there is a lot of facility for impaired children also, so that they may not be pitied upon and they may not feel complexed in life. Okay, then Derrick actually is a three-dimensional character, and he is capable of giving a surprise to others, like towards the end when he shed his negative attitude towards life. And Mr. Lamb's cryptic words of wisdom, cryptic, C-R-Y-P-T-I-C, cryptic words of wisdom inspire him, and he rushes back to the garden to adopt the attitude and path shown by him. So that's the character of Mr. Derrick, or Derry the lad. Now, as I told you, the theme is basically that appearances are deceptive, and most often we go on dealing with our impressions and prejudices about others without caring to know them actually. We form our own opinions, we form our own prejudices, but when we meet them and when we start to deal with them, then we realize that how wrong we were. Now, Mr. Lamb, for example, how the mother says that people do not talk very highly of Mr. Lamb, and he's not a good man, he's old and eccentric and all that. So people consider him to be a lonely, eccentric, lame old man who lives in the neighborhood, as is clear from Derrick's mother's conversation. And parents don't want their children to go to him or to his garden. They feel that he's a weird old man. But in reality, Mr. Lamb is a very kind and loving person, generous person, who longs for company, and he loves his fellow human beings and all other creations of God. Okay? So that's the difference about the opinion that people have framed about him and what he actually is. Okay? And similarly, on the face of it, Derrick appears to be an abominable and ugly boy with a huge and deep scar on one side of his face. Nobody likes him or loves him or befriends him, is friendly with him. And he's the object of other people's ridicule and humiliation and hateful stares, okay, and neglect. And everyone dreads his ugliness and avoids him. And In fact, even his mother, the very fact that the writer has said that she kissed him on the other side of the face, so the mother also, in a way, avoided him. But despite all this, he has a very tender and sensitive heart, and he has a deep longing to love and be loved. Okay, and although he suffers from this acute inferiority complex and a deep lack of self-confidence and but he's strong enough to take things in his stride. What he actually basically needed was a healing touch and a loving care in order to transform him and to help him to live his life fully. That's what he needed, basically, a little bit of guidance. Okay, and fortunately for him, he meets Mr. Lamb and he finds himself transformed. Then a sub-theme of the play is that the pain of actual physical impairment is often much less than the pain which is given by the others. A sense of alienation felt by the person, with disabilities. So that's a sub-theme. So that is why when you're dealing with an impaired person, never show sympathy, never show pity. Treat them like normal people are treated. Okay, so that's another sub-theme of the play. Because if you try to ignore them, if you try to neglect them, then the hurt is unbearable, And Derrick also suffers more on account of the pain of alienation shown by the others and their comments and all, not so much by the acid, but actually by the way people treat him and ignore him. Okay. Then there is another small theme which is woven very dexterously or skillfully into the play, that scars do not change a person and that handicaps must be accepted in life and society. Okay. Instead of fussing over Derrick's scars or Mr. Lamb's eccentricity and artificial legs, people around them should have realized that the two are also human beings, just like themselves, just as they are. And if they're given a little bit of time, a little bit of space, then they will do well in life. Okay? You have to give them that space and that time and that encouragement and make them feel that yes, they can also do it, achieve it. But what do we see today? We see that people, they fail to realize the uniqueness of every human being. Not only human being, but every creation of God, okay? And we divide the world with war, hatred, prejudice, and indifference, okay? So on the face of it, seems to be different, yet underneath we are the same, okay? The play, it raises an important question, a pertinent question. When will we understand this phenomena, and when will we accept it, and when will we conduct our lives accordingly, of giving space, time, attention and love to the ones who are not so fortunate, rather than ignore them and neglect them and be indifferent towards them. Okay. Then we come across the title. On the face of it, it's like an informal expression that we generally use, as I told you, that looks can be deceptive. So the title is absolutely correct or very apt, because an individual may be quite different from what we think of him or what he or she may apparently turn out to be or appear to be at the first glance. Okay, so it is very important for us, all of us, imperative for us to view others by removing our glasses of prejudice, hatred, hearsay and dislike. Hearsay means what we've heard from other people. So we should not believe that. We should judge people for ourselves, So on the face of it, Mr. Lamb appears to be mysterious, eccentric, lame old fellow who lives in the neighborhood. But basically we see that he's very kind, generous, loving, and altruistic. Okay? And Derrick seems to have an ugly face, and he seems to be, a very, what do you call, a very kind of a brat, okay? Impertinent brat. But then what we actually figure out for him is that he also is a boy who is longing for love. What is wrong is the way people in their lives and around them view and treat them, the way they view them and treat them. Then a small little example is a clown, for instance, a clown who, entertains people, and he makes you laugh till you turn hysterical. But it's not necessary that that clown is very happy internally. There may be a lot of pain and suffering within, but on the face of it, he makes everybody laugh and he entertains people, and that's his mode of earning. So, but that doesn't mean that, he has no problems, he has no pain, he has no sorrows, he has no suffering. So that is what it actually means on the face of it. On the face of it, there is so much of diversity. There are so many differences among us, which divide the people and the species of the world. But underneath is a oneness, is a sameness, and all of us have been created by God. That oneness. We are all born. We all have to die, and we all, should accept each other mutually with love. So that is what the whole chapter is all about. So I hope you've been able to get an insight into it. Now, certain question and answers. Why does Derrick want to go back home as soon as he comes face to face with Mr. Lamb? Now, Derrick has climbed over the wall and he's gone into the garden thinking that it will be empty, and it's out of curiosity that he had entered. But when Mr. Lamb speaks and startles him, and he becomes aware of Mr. Lamb's presence, he feels embarrassed and, without taking the owner's permission. And then he's also afraid that, like most other people, Mr. Lamb will also find his face very scary. So he wants to go back or come out as soon as possible. Next question. What, according to Mr. Lamb, does Derrick... why, according to Mr. Lamb, does Derrick want to go back? How does he put the boy at ease? Mr. Lamb believes that Derrick wants to turn back because he is afraid of him, particularly because he has entered the garden stealthily, very quietly. So he tries to talk the boy out of his fear. Talk the boy means to build up a conversation. He assures the boy that he is only partially ugly and frightful, not completely, not wholly, and he suggests that Derrick should stay back and help him in picking the apples to make jelly. Next question. What terrible complex does Derrick suffer from? One side of Derrick's face was severely burnt away by acid, and as a result he had started looking very ugly, and nobody liked to look at him, love him, befriend him, or play with him. So this made Derrick suffer from an acute lack of self-regard and rejection. Why does Derrick feel that Mr. Lamb has changed the subject? Do you agree with Derrick? Give reason in support of your answer. When he's talking about the face and then Mr. Lamb starts talking about the apples, so he has changed the subject. So why does Derrick feel that way? Derrick feels that Mr. Lamb has changed the subject because instead of responding to Derrick's conversation about being ugly and unwanted, Mr. Lamb starts talking about apple picking and jelly making, and he asks for his help. Yes, of course, Mr. Lamb has changed the subject deliberately, purposely, to prevent Derrick from going further into that self-hatred or that self-complex that he had developed. He wanted to bring him out of it and not go back deeper into it. Uh, what does Derrick feel Mr. Lamb must think of him? How does Mr. Lamb surprise him in this context? Derrick feels that, like other people, Mr. Lamb would also feel scared looking at his burnt face, and he would pity him and, out of repulsion, would want him to go away. But nothing of the sort happens. However, he is in for a surprise when Mr. Lamb welcomes him into the garden, and he tells him that he is interested in him, and he tries to build up a conversation with him. How would you explain Mr. Lamb's expression, "I'm old, you're young. You've got a burnt face, I've got a tin leg"? Not important. So Mr. Lamb wants to make Derrick understand that everyone has one or the other reason to hate and dislike himself or oneself. One has, each one of us. There can be some reason, okay, and feel inferior to others. But such a feeling is disastrous, okay? It's disastrous. It does not really matter how one looks. What is more important is that we need to accept ourselves and the others as they are, and we should learn to live life fully. One must have a positive attitude and not allow any complexes to block one's way to a life of happiness and fulfillment. Okay, next question. Do you think Derrick's attitude towards life would have been different if he had been lame instead of having a burnt face? Do you think his, attitude would be different? Derrick thinks that Mr. Lamb can cover up his handicap by wearing trousers. So his attitude towards life is different. And if he had been lame, he would have led a normal life. But he is actually wrong, because Derrick's problem is psychological. Please remember, children, Derrick's problem is psychological. People would still have made fun of him, and Derrick would have remained frustrated because of his lameness and negative attitude towards life. Okay, so even if he had been lame, his attitude would have been the same. Why is one green growing plant called a weed and another flower? What does Mr. Lamb mean by this statement? Mr. Lamb is a staunch believer, strong believer in the inherent oneness and equality of all the species created by God. And he rejects all man-made differences and distinctions. All living beings, he feels, they are the same. They all grow. Whatever difference there might be, it is only a very superficial and unimportant difference. Okay, so what he's trying to say, that a weed also has life, a flower also has life, and both are growing because there is oneness. He believes in oneness and equality in all things created by God. Okay, then we come on to the next question. It's all relative. Beauty and the beast. What does Mr. Lamb mean by this statement? There's a little reference, okay, to this story that is there, this fairy tale that is there about the beauty and the beast. Okay, the beauty falls in love with this beast, and actually the beast is a prince. Okay, but the beast at that time did not know that he was a prince that way. So Mr. Lamb means to say that different people have different viewpoints to look at the same thing. Some find one thing beautiful, others find it ugly. It all depends on one's outlook and attitude, because each one is unique and has their own individual viewpoint. Okay, therefore it is very important to adopt a positive attitude to everything in life, just like the Princess Beauty, who loved the monstrous beast in the fairy tale, but the beast, although he was a prince, failed to discover his reality. So all are the same, basically. His inwardness is princely thing, but Beauty had fallen in love with the Beast. Okay, so that's the reference to a little fairy tale. Okay. So you will, but the world won't. The world's got a whole face and the world's there to be looked at. Explain. When Derrick says that no one will ever love him because he's going to continue to remain ugly all his life and have a scary face, Mr. Lamb tries to comfort him and console him by saying that it does not matter if Derrick's looks won't change till, he is alive. But it is quite possible that people's attitude towards him will change and they may accept him and love him. And there is no use for Derrick to go on complaining of being ugly when there is so much beauty in the world to be explored and appreciated. Why why hang on to just one aspect that, one side of the face is burnt and is ugly, when there are so many other things to be looked at and to be viewed, and they're all so beautiful, from which you can learn so much. What concept of the world does Mr. Lamb propound when Derrick asked him if his old garden is a world? When Derrick asked him this question about his old garden is a world, Mr. Lamb replies that yes, his garden is the world, saying it is his world when he is in it. When he's in the garden, that's his world. When he goes into the house, that's his world. Okay, so that his garden is not the only world. The world is where one is. So wherever you are, the surroundings, everything, that is your world. So love yourself and love the world around. So this is the unique concept of the world. Next question. Do you think that through the incident of buzzing, humming of bees, the author wants to tell us that life treats us the way we treat it? Do you agree? If so, why? Now, the author has brought about the incident of the buzzing or the humming of the bees to bring home the point, or to give the message to the reader that life treats us the way we take it. Music and noise coexist, okay? And if we choose music in life, we lead a life full of cheer and happiness. But if we keep paying attention to the noise alone, then our life becomes a bundle of frustrations, okay? So the choice is ours, what we want to pick. We want to pick up noise or we want to pick up music, okay? Why does Mr. Lamb narrate the story of a man who locked himself in a room because he was afraid? Now here, Mr. Lamb actually narrated this so that Derrick could realize that recoiling into oneself and building a shell around does not help at all. What Derrick actually needed was to shed his fear, to give up his fear, to shed his fear, to shed his complex and self-hatred and live life fully. That's what he's trying to tell us through that story of the man who died when the picture fell on his head. Okay, what is Mr. Lamb's daily routine? So he lives alone in a huge, in a large house with a huge garden, and during the day, he tells Derrick that there are children who come visiting him for crab apples and pears and toffee and jelly, and he's busy picking apples and pears, tending to his bees, making jelly and toffee. Apart from this, he says that he likes to talk to children who visit him. He also likes to read books and reflect. Why doesn't Mr. Lamb have any curtains at the windows? Unlike most people, Mr. Lamb does not have curtains because he is not fond of them. He doesn't like them. He believes that curtains shut out things. Instead, he likes to experience the alternating phase of light and darkness, and he likes to hear the wind. Why does Mr. Lamb feel Derrick is not lost altogether, that there is some scope in him for improvement? Mr. Lamb has heard Derrick's story and his, complaint, and he's heard him talking, bemoaning, and spitting hatred for himself. He does not like to seem to like anybody or anything. So when Derrick says that he likes when it is raining and he likes to hear to that pitter-patter on the roof, Mr. Lamb realizes and discovers that the boy does have some interest in life, and he remarks, "So you're not lost, are you? Not altogether." That means there is some scope for improvement, because he is not completely turned into a stone like that, because he does talk about enjoying the rain and listening to the pitter-patter on the roof. So from there, Mr. Lamb gathers that there is scope for this child to change, because he does have a little bit of softness and love for nature, and an ear for that kind of music, and a mindset that likes such things. So he could transform him. What does Mr. Lamb tell Derrick he can do? Mr. Lamb tells Derrick that he's a 14-year-old boy and he's just given up on life because of his burnt face on one side by that acid. So he tells Derrick that he has got 2 arms, he's got 2 legs, he's got eyes, he's got ears, and he has a tongue and a brain, okay, with which he can get on in life like any other boy. He can live a normal life. And he could, in fact, he could even do better than the others, because, he has immense potential. But that can only happen if he develops that attitude, and if he makes that choice and he sets his mind to it. Okay. Why does Derrick ask Mr. Lamb if he has any friends? What answer does Mr. Lamb give him? Now, Derrick has noticed so far, while the conversation is going on, that he lives in a big house, and in that neighborhood in the garden, Mr. Lamb has told him about the children and everything. But out of curiosity, he asks him if he had any friends. And Mr. Lamb says that he has lots of friends and everybody knows him, and that people come to him, they sit in his garden in summers and in front of the fire in winter. And kids come for toffee and apples and pears. Okay. Why does Derrick say he's not a friend of Mr. Lamb? What does Mr. Lamb say in response? So Derrick believes that he's not a friend of Mr. Lamb because they're not acquainted. Mr. Lamb does not know him well. He's just come there for the first time, and he does not know his name and where he has come from, his whereabouts, nothing. Then Mr. Lamb very gently tells him that as far as he's concerned, Derrick is his friend. You don't need to be an acquaintance. It does not matter what the name is and where he has come from. Okay. What condition does Derrick put on his friendship with Mr. Lamb? What doubt does he have about this friendship? How does Mr. Lamb dispel this doubt? Derrick tells Mr. Lamb that he could call him Derry and accepts to be Mr. Lamb's friend. Okay, but he says that Mr. Lamb does not have to be his friend in return. Okay, I mean, it's not necessary. He wonders if he could continue to be Mr. Lamb's friend if he never came back. Mr. Lamb assures him that their friendship would continue even then also, even if he did not come back. There are some people I hate. How does Mr. Lamb react to the statement of Derrick? Mr. Lamb believes that hatred is man's worst enemy. As I told you earlier, that acid also cannot corrode so much as hatred corrodes you from within, and that hurt can never actually go away. Mr. Lamb remarks that hatred would do him more harm than the acid that has burnt his face. Okay, and hatred will burn away him from the inside. Indirectly, what he's trying to tell Derrick is that hatred is unnatural. Love is something that is natural, it comes. But hatred is unnatural, and that is why it is very injurious to mankind, very harmful to mankind. The natural instinct is to love, okay? And for all maladies, it's the best medicine, because love is inborn, it's natural, but hatred you develop later on, okay? Okay, next question. At what stage of the play and what comment of Derrick makes you feel that he's a changed individual now? Okay. The challenge which is thrown by Mr. Lamb, that once Derrick goes back home, he will never come back, and that's what he feels. So when the challenge is thrown by Mr. Lamb to Derrick, and then Derrick immediately replies or retorts that Mr. Lamb does not know him. Does not know him means does not know Derrick, what he could do and what he's capable of. And from then on, we realize that Derrick is a changed individual. How does Mr. Lamb's conversation transform Derrick? Now, basically, as we see, that Derrick is a sensitive, a child, and his long conversation with Mr. Lamb has actually, brought him out of his shell of inferiority complex and his poor self-regard. So he no longer hates himself for his ugly face, or the others who dislike him or who are scared of his ugliness. Now, what he feels, what is important is to live life and to explore and experience the world. And that is how, we see that Mr. Lamb has been able to transform him. Why does Derrick return to Mr. Lamb's garden? He returned to his garden because, first of all, he had promised that he would come, and the main aspect why he came back was because Derrick discovered that Mr. Lamb had actually helped him rediscover himself and add a new meaning to his life. So now Derrick wants to leave his handicap behind, and he wants to move ahead or forge ahead in life, and he wants to live life to the fullest. So he feels that he is Mr. Lamb's natural successor, and he has to carry on with this mission. Just as Mr. Lamb had transformed him from one generation, he was the next generation. So he also felt that it was his duty to carry on this mission and maybe transform somebody else. What significance would you attach to Derrick's statement, "You shouldn't believe all you hear"? Now, here when he says this to his mother, that you shouldn't believe, when the mother is talking about what people say about Mr. Lamb. So he says, you shouldn't believe all you hear. Now this comment is very, very important. Why? Because we see that he has started speaking the language of Mr. Lamb. That's what Mr. Lamb had told him, and this is what he's repeating, or actually using these words when he's talking to his mother. And he tries to impress upon his mother that there's always a gap between what really is and what people say and think, and that one should not believe in hearsay. Hearsay is what spreads around, what people tell each other. So that's hearsay. What idea do you form about Derrick's mother from this brief encounter? So we can say that Derrick's mother is an unintelligent lady. She has failed to understand her son's tragedy, his psychological problem, okay? And she has not been able to stop him from going into that shell. In fact, her behavior and her ways have made him go deeper into that shell, okay? And he has begun to hate himself so much. So she has not been able to comprehend his action, his feelings, his nuances, okay? And she's not been able to read between the lines, so to speak. Like the others, she also is repelled by the burnt side of Derrick's face, and that is why she kisses him only on the side on the good side, that is not burnt. What makes Derrick observe that if I don't go back there, I'll never go anywhere in the world again? Now here we see a transformed Derrick. Derrick has rediscovered the joy of life, and he actually is very, very thankful to Mr. Lamb. And he strongly feels that he must do something for the lonely old man. And he makes the statement in question to tell his mom how important it is for him to go back to Mr. Lamb, because he has promised to return, unlike his other friends, okay, of the old man. And Derrick also feels that he can live a meaningful life only by furthering Mr. Lamb's mission, okay. Last question. What significance would you attach to Mr. Lamb's silence at the end of the play? Every individual in this world has special tasks allotted to him, okay, which must be performed. The old impaired Mr. Lamb needed someone to carry on his good work he had started. Fortunately for him, he finds Derrick as his successor. And now a lot of his burden is off his head and he can die peacefully. So he becomes silent in order to experience fulfillment and peace. Death is peaceful, okay? And there is peace in death, okay? Eternal sleep. So he wants to experience, he becomes silent, he dies, he wants to experience fulfillment and peace. He is silent, perhaps, because he is already dead when Derrick calls him. So one silence is literal silence and the other is the deathly silence, okay? And he dies a peaceful death. Why? Because he has fulfilled his purpose in life and he has found a successor. Okay. I think that's all. You'll be able to, I hope you've been able to understand the chapter, okay? There are some other questions, the slightly essay kind of questions, which I think I will take up in another video, okay, for the long question and answers, the essay type. So, all the best, children, and stay safe, stay blessed. God bless you all.